Hi, Robert. I'm very happy that we meet today here and that we talk about your books, your book projects, your life, and your views of Reiki. You told me in the talk we had before that you are already practicing since several decades. Would you
Right.
like to tell a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I started practicing in 1996
Wow.
and I was 21 and I had no idea where this would take me because I wasn't into anything of the sort. Energy work, alternative medicine, whatever category people put the system Reiki in, I wasn't into this. I only took the class because coincidence. I followed the signs, so to speak. I followed the signs. And so I joined this book club back in the day when you'd have a mail-in book club. This is
Hmm.
before the internet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I chose to get 5 books for a penny, right? And
Wow.
then, yeah, and then you have to buy so many more books at regular club price, right? So I chose 4 of the 5 books pretty fast. I still had a fifth book for free, basically, to choose. And I didn't see anything really that interesting. And I saw this book and it said Reiki. And I thought it was like Reiki, I thought, oh, Reiki, what is that? So it said, oh, Japanese energy work. I'm like, I don't know about this. So I picked it up anyway. I was like, that's free, whatever. So the book came, I didn't read it. About a year later, I got it off my bookshelf, read the introduction. And it said, a little bit about Reiki and this kind of stuff, energy, but you have to be initiated by a Reiki master. And I'm like, I'm up here in Bowling Green, Ohio. There's no Reiki masters. I've never heard of Reiki master. So this book is completely useless. So I read the introduction. That was it. I put it back on my bookshelf.
Hmm.
And that week, I was in a cafe and I was doing a drum session. So there's like little, you can walk in and do open mic night in cafes where musicians just sit up and play a couple songs, right? So I was doing this. And then on a break, I'm walking down the hallway. And on the cork board in the hallway, there was like a little thumbtack and a piece of paper, and it said Reiki class now available, right? And I did like a double take because I'm like, what Reiki class? I just read about this thing in my book last week. And so I called the guy up and he's like, well, I'm only here a little bit, I'm visiting from Maui. And so if you want a class, you have to set it up. And I need at least 5 students. So long story short, I was able to convince 5 of my friends to take this class with me, even though I didn't really know much about it. Um, but they trusted me, and I was like, "No, I'm excited. I want to take this class." All of a sudden, I'm excited. I don't know why. So, the thing about the class was, he's like, "You gotta practice. You have to practice this every day." And I'm like, that doesn't sound like me. I mean, yeah, at all. Like, for most people, it's hard to pick up a new habit.
Mhm.
Like exercise or whatever. So tell me to do something every day. I didn't see that was going to work, but I thought, okay, whatever. I gave the guy some money, so I'll I'll test it, because I didn't feel anything when he was doing initiations. I didn't feel anything, so I started practicing every day, and I still didn't feel anything. But by golly, I gave him money, and so because I had given him money, I was like, I got to prove this either works or it doesn't work. And if I do the practice and I see it works, fine. If I do the practice and it doesn't work, I don't have to do it anymore. At least I know. At least I know. But about a month later, about 4 weeks, I started feeling something, and I started, having changes in my body before that. And
Wow.
yes, so I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I'll just keep practicing because the guy told me to practice." So it was interesting. I mean, I was just like kind of sucked in there, and I just kind of followed since then, just the signs that would appear, like, to guide me along my way. And so it's been 20 something years. I ended up studying Chinese medicine to understand the system of Reiki better. And it just kind of like took my life in a very interesting different direction than I had thought I was going to go. But here I am you know
Wow, that's an interesting story. So you didn't know much about the whole thing, but you
No.
divine was putting you into it.
Yeah. It's just like they just I just kept following it.
Yeah,
Like this keeps showing up. All right, I'll pull on that string, and
I
see
see.
where it
Yeah.
leads, right? Yeah, see where it leads. And yeah, so one thing just led to another. Even after that, I that guy was back in Maui. I practiced for 6 months, and it had finally occurred to me after practicing for 6 months, like I think the guy told me about that there was a second degree. It didn't even occur to me to look in my book. It didn't occur to me. I just knew he told me to practice. And so I practiced, and I practiced on myself. I practiced with my friends. So found a second degree teacher, a flyer. Again, I'm just walking downtown, there's a flyer in somebody's window, on a shop window. And, one thing led to another. Yeah, it was interesting, how things go. So I write quite extensively about my, let's say, journey, in volume one in that book series, that you mentioned. But yeah,
So Reiki for you opened your path to your vocation, right?
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, it was funny because I wanted to do Reiki, for a living way back in the 90s. But of course, not a whole lot of people knew what it was. And I also wanted to eat. I wanted
Oh.
food. I wanted to be able to pay rent. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna go to acupuncture school, because it sounds interesting and it does involve chi and all this other stuff. I would get some credentials, behind my name, so it looked like I know something.
Mhm.
And then I can do Reiki full time. And it was kind of funny, but I literally went to acupuncture school because I was interested in the system of Reiki.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's kind of how I got in. And little did I know how much, the Chinese medical training would
Mhm.
help me understand the
Ah,
system of
yeah.
Reiki. And
Yeah.
I was not prepared for that at all. I had no idea. Um, and my degree before that was a Master of Library and Information Science. And I just ended up in that program, just by not, just by circumstances. And little did I know that the skills I would learn would help me in my research. I mean, I had no idea, but everything just kind of, looking back in hindsight, you could see how things line up.
Yes.
But in the moment, you're just kind of fumbling through, just, just
Yes.
doing your
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I got my first degree, it was my naturopathic doctor. He had a certificate on the wall, and I was looking at that. That was 1987. Nobody knew about Reiki. And I asked him,
Right.
what is Reiki? He said, oh, it's great. In 4 weeks, there is a class. You sign up. And I asked him, what is it? He said, I won't tell you. It's good for you. Just sign up.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, okay.
I trusted him, and here I am.
Yeah, I know. It's funny to look back like that, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Robert, what do you think about the master degree, the third degree, teacher degree, whatever you like to call it? What is
Mhm.
it for you?
Well, I mean, it's a process of
Yeah.
continuous learning. And I had a master's student, who had trained with several other people before, I trained him, and his name's Constantine. And he told me, that the word master is a verb. It is not a noun.
Mhm.
And when he said that, I was like, he's got it. It's not that you do third degree and you're a master, like nobody can make you a master. I mean, you can go through training, nobody can make you a master, right? So the third degree, for me is this constant state of, trying to live the precepts, of course, and it's individual too. I feel like there's a bunch of individuality. It's being true to yourself.
Mhm.
And so for me, following, where my passion leads and my research and learning more and practicing and never forget to practice, 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 practice.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, but I mean, you're just constantly, and like now, I feel like my focus. I mean, teaching is definitely a part of third degree in my world,
Mm-hmm.
and but also there's different parts of third degree,
Yeah.
and so I feel like the parts I'm kind of really excited about now are to just kind of hopefully inspire other Reiki masters to really consider and reflect upon the training that they give
Yeah.
in to their own students in their own classes, especially to the masters that they may train.
Hmm.
I mean, really think about what it is, how you want to structure it, and we're all going to structure, or we think about it differently, right? Because some people literally, I mean, we are so across the board on our viewpoints, and some people view Reiki as a commodity. So if you view it as a commodity, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying if you view it that way, your training times, requirements, pricing, all that's going to be different
Yeah.
than somebody who views it as maybe something more than that, as a way of life, or a way to develop ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so, I feel like there's definitely room that I hope people will reflect seriously about how they offer master training, especially. I mean, all levels are important for different reasons, but I feel like I don't want people to miss the boat,
Hmm.
and come to third degree and be like, okay, I did third degree, I'm a Reiki master. You
Now I know
know,
it all.
I know it all. And, I tell people, I mean, I took a running class, in college as part of my physical education requirement. I took a running class 20 something years ago. That does not make me a runner.
No. Mm.
Okay. So, because I
I
don't
see. I
run,
see.
I
Yeah.
don't run now. So just taking a class doesn't do it. Right. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to it. And it's a serious, for me, it's a serious undertaking,
Yeah.
and I think that, Usui would, and Hayashi and Mrs. Takata would agree. And I feel like they would agree simply because you can see how many masters they trained,
Mhm.
versus first degree and second degree students. Only super serious. And Takata Takata had this unpublished autobiography, which we're trying to get it published. There was a group of us, the archive team, and we're still, hopefully, it's still supposedly in production. We say it's in production, but I'm hoping it will come out so everybody can read her own words. But Takata did all these audio recordings about her life story,
Yeah.
and it's a huge book, and she talks about the character tests that she had to pass from Hayashi. And of course, she didn't know she was getting these character tests, but he was testing her, not just her healing abilities, because that's part of the system, but also her character. Could she follow the precepts? Watching her, spending time with her, how does she react to situations? But especially like honoring the system.
Hmm.
And as we know, from Takata stories anyway, that Hayashi wasn't initially going to train her,
Hmm.
because he was like, no, I know Americans, they're going to change it and just turn it into something else. And guess what? He was right. And
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
Takata
Yeah.
Takata convinced him, like, no, I will hold this as much as possible. I will do my best.
Hmm.
And she passed all his tests, and I think she did a pretty good job. But Hayashi was right. And
Hmm.
it's not that change is wrong. It's just that change without understanding, then you lose something. Once you understand something, you understand. And so, but sometimes people are like, don't understand something, so they just change it to fit
Yes.
their own
Yes.
understanding instead of waiting to have the understanding, of
Yeah.
what the practice can do for them. And that's what I think is a little bit unfortunate. So I hope everybody practices more and more. And I think I want to see more Reiki practitioners. And I mean it, like practitioner, people who practice. You know,
Yeah,
I don't care how many degrees somebody has. I just care if they practice. And if they follow the Reiki precepts, they're my brother or my sister. You know, they are my
right.
family. That's who, you know. So I hope that that's kind of what inspires me right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, you mentioned the Reiki precepts. So one thing Takata was changing was some of the Reiki precepts.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she had like different words, and then like later she would add in things that to me are inherent.
Hmm.
Actually, they were inherent in American culture for a long time, but no longer. Like honor your parents, teachers, and elders.
Christian.
That, yeah, because you know, like go 100 years ago in America, that's just how it was too.
Yes, yes, sure.
But not our culture, not today's culture. And so I
Really?
feel like, yeah, so I feel like, well, I mean, if you think about it, like honor your parents, teachers, and elders. Okay, I can tell you, right, my whole Reiki lineage going back to Usui.
Hmm.
Okay, can I do that for my own family if I'm supposed to honor my parents? Okay, I know them. I met my grandparents. I knew them for a little while, but they were all gone by the time I was like 10 or so. I don't know my great grandparents' name. So that's only three, like three generations back. I don't know anything. I know
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah,
And so you can see, and some people are like, oh, Reiki lineage is important. I'm not here to discuss that. What I'm discussing is the importance in Japanese, this Japanese system, that lineage is important traditionally. And whether you agree or not, that's okay. But traditionally, it is important. And that's how can we honor our teachers if we don't know who they were, if we don't
right.
know what they were teaching? It's hard to do. It's hard to stay, in that mindset.
Mhm.
Because we learn from our teachers and then we learn from Reiki itself.
Mm.
And so hopefully we have a good jumping board to
Yeah.
start learning. And that's a good teacher.
Hmm.
You know, that's what a good teacher can do is help you take the leap and be there, you know, for you when you need advice or a mentor or something. Um, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. So some people have the idea that if someone becomes a Reiki master, then they are a spiritual master, like Sai
Right.
Baba or Osho or so. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, Reiki masters are people.
Yeah. Mm.
And, you know, a spiritual master and a Reiki master to me aren't necessarily exclusive. It's just that, like, you can become, let's say a spiritual master by practicing Reiki, but only if you practice and follow its tenets, like the precepts.
Yeah.
And that's how, I mean, it's amazing, that this system, you can have a self-improvement system. You have enough stuff in first degree to last a lifetime because you get
Oh,
the
yeah.
first,
Oh, oh, yeah.
you get the precepts.
Yeah.
You get the precepts in the first degree. You get how to treat yourself, how to treat others. That's a lot, you know. I mean, I get challenged by the precepts to this day, of course.
Me too.
um, yeah, and when you do, what I'm hoping goes off in my mind is like look a little bell, ding ding ding, like, oh, I'm being challenged. Here, oh, starting to be angry. If I start doing my practice and just put my hands on, I just naturally like start kind of becoming, I don't know if you want to say infused with Reiki or whatever, but everything starts, the anger goes away. I start just kind of feeling connected with everything.
Yeah.
And in that kind of space, that kind of Reiki consciousness, everything's perfect as it is. And then I'm kind of resonating with the precepts.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's a continuous process of coming back to that space. And that's why I practice, practice, practice. And that's important, I think, for all students to have practice. And some lineages have requirements between first and second degree and whatever. I think it's good to have practice, not necessarily always possible, but it's good. That way you only get more serious students who have like gone through the, you know, oh, I'm so excited about this, and then they drop it,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it's kind of like, but yeah, it all comes back to practice. So spiritual master and Reiki master completely different.
Mhm.
You can print out a Reiki master certificate off the internet if you want. It doesn't
Yeah.
change who you are.
No.
And I feel like that goes back to master training. If you're the same person before and after your master training with your teacher, you miss something. Like something didn't, something, no. I
Mhm.
mean, there should be, a transformation of some sort that goes place, this journey that we go on during master training. And it's not a journey like you got to go up the mountain or something. It's like an inner journey of understanding and understanding more and more and more to the point where we understand, like, wow, like I know nothing. And then we start all over again, learning and learning and learning. And then you get to a place, wow, I really don't know hardly anything. And then we start learning more about that. And for me, it's kind of like a cyclical a
Yeah.
cyclical process. And when people start, I think when masters start understanding that, then judgment starts dropping, because we can't, I mean, like, who are we to say anything? Because we're constantly changing. This person, is changing. We're all changing. And, I have no idea. Maybe that's right for them in the moment. I just feel like, you get more and more peace and harmony within. And when you can become perfectly just okay, I
Mhm.
mean, just perfectly content,
Mhm.
I think then maybe you're a spiritual master.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe. I'm not there yet.
Well, you are working on it, like
Yeah,
I think
all right.
all of us.
Right.
So do you understand writing your books, um, which, as far as I have seen from your first book, are really in-depth research. They are written from the heart. They are not only scholarly work. Do you
Right.
understand writing these books as a part of your master path, or what is your motivation? What drives
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, it is definitely, that you put it that way. It's an interesting way of putting it because I do feel like I've been called to write that, an inward calling.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
first book, the first book was more of an outward calling. I had a teacher, Takata Inamoto sensei, and he told me, he didn't ask, he told me, he he told me to write a book.
Hmm.
And we were at lunch together in North Carolina. I had gone through his Komio training. I never taught Komio, but I've been in his master training class 3 times, because it doesn't matter. Like it's his, people's beings and the stuff they're teaching, not like the technical things, but the way he presents precepts and stuff. So I was in this third class with him, and we were on lunch, and we were eating at a restaurant, and he said, "Robert, I want you to write a book about Mrs. Takata and like all this stuff that all this history stuff." And he's like, "I don't want this stuff lost." And I was like, "No, sensei, I don't want to do that. I've never written a book before. I remember in high school, I hated it. In college, I hated writing papers and stuff. I don't want to do that." And he's like, "Robert, I want you to write a book." I'm like, "No, sensei, I really don't want to." And he's like, "Robert, I want you to write a book." And I thought, okay, I can't refuse him a third time because I feel like that would be rude.
Hmm.
So I said, okay, I'll write it, but I didn't tell him when. And so it was many years later
Hmm.
that I got around to doing it. And it was amazing because when I started writing, it was like teaching. Like when I was teaching, like I literally, like, in class, I opened my mouth and words would come out and then they'd hit my ear. I'm like, who just said that? Because that sounded awesome. Like I could never have thought of something that great. Like that wasn't me. Like just, Reiki's teaching the class. And when I'm typing, the same way when I'm in, like, say, in the groove, when I'm in that field, it just kind of flows. And what gets me stuck so much is the editing. Oh my gosh, that's such a
Yeah.
drag,
Oh,
because it's totally not in that flow.
no.
I'm like, oh, the editing, it just is a time waster. It's important, but
Yeah,
ah,
you need to do it, but it's really a pain in the.
it is. And it's like, I don't like to do it. And maybe that's just my resistance, but you know what? That's where I'm at in my process. I like the flow, just the right,
Yeah,
right, 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 right. But yeah, I feel like this is part of my journey at this point. And my mentors and my teachers have been passing, and more recently. And I feel like this has also been a catalyst, because the masters I train, I want them to teach. I mean, I
yes,
spent years with them and training them. So if they don't teach, okay,
they're
what
not
was I
masters.
doing? What was I? What was I? I mean, I'm good. I'm glad they're whatever in their own journey, but I was hoping, they would teach. But and they are. Some of them are, but so it kind of it's funny because it kind of hit me now that some of my own teachers more keep passing, or my mentors are passing, that they thought the same thing of me. And so I feel like I no longer consider myself not teaching. I am not teaching right now, but like I mentioned in our pre-interview, Marta Getty told me, Robert, you haven't stopped teaching Reiki. You didn't stop. You're just on a break. She's like, don't say you stopped. You didn't stop. I'm telling you, you're on a break. So I feel like I'm on a break and I can teach through my writing right now, and hopefully, have some kind of positive impact on people.
Mhm, mhm.
So
Yeah, that I think you have. At least you had it on me, and I recommended your book to many of my friends
thank
and colleagues.
thank you.
Because it's really adding a lot of very important insights into history of Reiki. And I think whenever you nourish the roots, you are nourishing the rest of the tree.
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned this lady several times. Who is she? Is she a Reiki master?
Oh, Marta Getty.
Hmm?
Yeah. So she was a Reiki master. She was actually she just passed recently.
Ah.
She knew Mrs. Takata.
Mhm.
She was accepted as a master candidate, but then Mrs. Takata went in transition. She was a founder of the Reiki Alliance, and she was the most amazing person. I mean, she was a true master, and I mean, somebody who inspired me.
Mhm.
And whenever I was with her, um, or we talk on the phone or through Skype or whatever, I always went away just amazed and feeling inspired. And it's just, people who have that influence on you to just keep going. And it's just like they're like your catalyst for, I mean, she really was a mentor, and she was a remarkable woman. And she,
Mhm.
like you, had traveled all over the world, teaching. And yeah, she was quite something.
Yeah, it's always important to have good teachers, good mentors, I think, because they give us the push, the insights, the incentives to think differently. And I guess you had a lot of good mentors and teachers, right?
I was very thankful. Yes,
Yeah.
I am very thankful that I have. And even the ones at the time, which I thought were not so good, th- looking back on it now, I'm so grateful,
Hmm.
because it was in those early first several classes I took back in 96 and 97
Hmm.
that I didn't get like everything. And I was told some stories, like that just weren't true, or the lineage was a little shady. Like I didn't quite understand how the lineage went. And so I was a little frustrated at the time because I was like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, why are all these
I see.
arrows on my lineage sheet
Yeah.
going everywhere? Who trained who here? But see, at that time it was frustrating, but like that led me on in my life to be like, I want to find out who are these people,
Hmm.
and who are the Takata master students. There wasn't like
Yeah.
a list that was readily available. So I went on a journey to find them and to find Mrs. Takata's master students. And so I ended up either studying with them or talking with them or working with them. in some capacity and be given, stuff by them or their students, and like historical documents or whatnot. And all because of some, things that weren't given to me in my first or second or third class that I had
Yeah.
taken,
Yeah.
which was frustrating. But now I'm so grateful, because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have gone on this other journey, and I
Right.
wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now.
Yeah. It was
So some,
like steps on the ladder. Yeah. Right.
right, exactly. You're like, oh man.
Hmm.
So, you start going, like, I gotta find out more. I want to know.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, you never know where it's going to lead if you just take that journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. You told me that Reiki brought you to study acupuncture, Chinese medicine,
Hmm.
herbalism, and so on. So, in which way contributed this to your understanding of Reiki, seen from today's point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite remarkable, because when I started studying the Chinese medicine, um, I was able to compartmentalize my brain. Like, okay, this is my Reiki box
Hmm.
in my brain, and this is my, Chinese medicine box. And those boxes are not going to touch each other, and I don't want to contaminate, one system
Yeah,
or the other.
yeah,
I want to keep the systems pure. And then, but I'd be teaching classes, and some student would ask me something, and then it like, aha, like just this aha moment would come. Like Mrs.
yeah.
Takata would, teach this, people call it the nerve stroke, but that's just one part. There's this whole finishing technique of it's like a massage at the end of doing a Reiki treatment to get the chi moving and the blood to move. And people call it like the blood exchange.
Hmm.
So I'm in class when I was a student, and you know, it was this technique Takata taught was to remove stagnant blood. It was the blood exchange. Well, it doesn't really mean much to most people. So we're in acupuncture school, and somebody's doing a demonstration of removing stagnant blood. And so we do, I don't know if you know what fire cupping is, where you take a glass cup, yeah, and a cotton ball is on fire, you put it in there and suck it on the person, and sucks in their muscle,
Right,
right?
right.
Well, okay. Well, so traditional Chinese medicine, we use bleeding techniques with fire cupping sometimes. So if you find like a spider nevi, like a small varicose vein kind of thing, and it's sometimes it's really painful for people. That's blood stagnation in there. That blood you see is no longer circulating. So
Mhm.
what an acupuncturist does is you take a lancet it, put the fire cup on there. And when they did that, all this black, tarry blood filled up the cup. It
Mhm.
was totally disgusting. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen, because it looked like tar. It looked like just
Yeah.
black, oozy stuff. I'm like, that is blood stagnation. And in Takata and Usui, they said you can remove blood stagnation, right, without needles. You can get rid of this blood, because the concept in Chinese medicine is you can't generate new blood
Mhm.
until you get rid of old blood.
Right.
It's just a common phrase. So they had ways of getting rid of old blood
Hmm.
with this system, the needleless
Wow.
system, right? You don't have to get all lancets and the cotton and all this gross stuff. You can do it without it. That's why this system's better. It's probably what they are marketing. But it was, then I was like, aha, now I get it. And there's like just little things here and there that they're like, wow, there's so much overlap. And I know that there's an overlap with multiple systems
Hmm.
from what Usui studied, but one is Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. It's really remarkable. It's remarkable how much overlap there is. And I'm hoping a student of mine who's now in acupuncture school will help with one of my future volumes, because trying to explain the overlap is it's easy to do to another explain to another acupuncturist, but to the lay folk who might not understand concepts in Chinese medicine, then it's a little challenging. But yeah, so acupuncture school has helped immensely me understand the system of Reiki, surprisingly for myself even.
I see. I
Um,
see. So, as far as my information goes and my own experience, at least in her later years, Takata didn't teach these techniques or just frequently.
Hmm.
So I didn't learn this when I was studying the different degrees of Reiki from 87 to 90. Um, uh, do you know when Takata stopped that, or was it just something she was uh, teaching to specific students?
Right. Well, as far as I know, she kept teaching it in her first degree classes.
Hmm.
But the master students, some of her master students stopped. They stopped teaching it.
Ah,
And
ah.
so, and that's unfortunate. And I mean, a lot of things actually were dropped. And like in Mrs. Takata's own writing and in the photos we have of her teaching classes,
Mm-hmm.
she's demonstrating some of this stuff. And it's remarkable. But like Virginia Samdall, there was an old book, a biography written about her, like Virginia Samdall, Reiki Master Healer. In the very back, in the appendix, is step by step the way that Virginia learned it, from Mrs. Takata. It's very detailed. Um, I happen to have Iris Shikuru's teaching notes. Iris was another master student of Mrs. Takata, and it's in there, the how to do this technique. And Fran Brown, who I studied with, she still taught it. Rick Bachner, who I watched him teach and sponsored him to come and teach classes, he still teaches it. And he was the last master trained by Mrs. Takata. But yeah, unfortunately, things get dropped, and that's where I think we were talking before, the interview, that it's unfortunate, but when some people, if you don't fully understand why we do certain things, because there's reasons why we do stuff in the system.
Sure.
Yeah, there's reasons, and we understand the reasons, and we're like, oh, okay, it makes it more meaningful, but also then it's less in danger just being dropped because, oh, I don't know, we don't need to do that. And
Mhm.
it's like, actually, that was done, that massage or blood exchange was done at the end of most treatments, if not all,
Mhm.
and was quite valuable for therapeutic purposes.
And is it the same with meditation? Did Takata also emphasize meditation, or was she taking this less serious?
I'm not sure. And that, to me, there was, here's the thing. There's some evidence, let's say, or uh, I've been told,
Mhm.
right, that she did teach some, let's say, meditation, but it wasn't like meditation as most people would think. I mean, there's Gassho meditation, and whenever Takata would teach, she's always like, "Watch me."
Mhm.
And we have pictures of Mrs. Takata just about to do a treatment.
Mhm.
Her hands are like this,
Mhm. Mhm.
and people just ignore that. So, like most people, when they go to do a Reiki training, they put their hands right on. But like putting your hands in Gassho and doing this whole energetic, she had energy practices that she would teach, but most people dropped them. Well, one was putting her hands in Gassho and letting that, and she explained the Reiki channel, which I'm going to go into. Like, I just put a little tiny excerpt almost in my volume 1, but volume 2 has much more details about the Reiki channel she was talking about, how the energy flowed in the body. And but yeah, meditation, like I've heard she taught some form, but I have 2 ways that she used to do. But I don't differentiate what I know from meditation and energy exercises, because to me they're kind of the same.
Mhm.
Because if you're paying attention to where you are and what you're doing, whether you're just sitting there watching your breath or whatever, it doesn't matter, or watching your hands. To me, that's meditation.
Mhm.
And so, that's why when we practice, pay attention. Just
Mhm.
watch your hands, watch, feel the energy rise and fall, whatever. But keep your mind where you are, you know. That to me is meditation, staying here. And when we practice or when we teach, we need to stay there. So when we practice, that means I think it's best not to have the TV on, or, whatever. It's just, it will work. Yeah, it will work still. I'm not saying it won't work. I'm just saying you're not going to receive the benefit of paying attention.
Hmm.
And this is where it's all happening. This is where we're going to learn. And
Yeah.
yeah, so because we're going to learn by experience, and Takata repeated that a lot. Reiki will teach you Reiki. What you're not even paying attention if you're watching the commercial. What are you learning? You're learning about some product maybe, but you're not learning what Reiki is trying to tell you. you know?
That's for sure. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, that is fascinating that Takata used so much from what she got from Hayashi, but
Mhm.
her students mostly did, or many of her students did not.
Right.
Uh, so the Reiki which came to the Western world mostly was just less than what she was doing.
Right. Exactly. And so when people say Western Reiki, I understand what they're saying, but to me, this does not include Takata.
Right.
Takata
Mhm.
made a promise and to her teacher, and because, like I said before, he was not going to train her because he knew what would happen if the Americans got a hold of the system. They would just change it or drop things, and that's what happened. But she's like, no, I'll be true. And so she had to go through all these tests, character tests, um, and healing tests, let's call them.
Mm.
And she didn't know she was being tested a lot of time, but she was. But after she passed, her master students were quite young, inexperienced, very inexperienced masters. We're thinking like 4 years. Somebody, maybe Sambo, who was trained at 76, was a master for 4 years, and she had a
Mhm.
lot of experience in those 4 years. But it's only 4 years.
That's right. It's not much.
It's not. It's not
Same with
much.
Usui, 4 years you can teach not so much.
No, you can't. And it would have been great, yeah, if she had they stuck around longer to mentor them and keep answering their questions, because as after Takata passed, then things got a little bit ugly between some Reiki groups, and people did whatever they did, and unfortunately, that's what happened, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. And but they were left without a serious, a well experienced teacher.
Yes, yes. No backbone to the system.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I think is so important for people, especially masters.
Yeah.
I feel like one aspect of mastery is, you should just be like, okay, don't train masters unless you have a lot of experience teaching first degree students. Don't teach second degree unless you have a lot of experience teaching first degree students. Don't
Right.
train masters unless you have a lot of experience. Because what are you passing along? Are you passing along your teaching experience? You don't have any. Like you have, and Takata had so much clinical experience,
Oh yeah.
And the way my life turned out, I ended up being in the clinic a lot and doing a lot of treatments on the table. And so for many, 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 many years, 20 years, I did a lot of Reiki treatments in a clinical setting. And, you know, I feel like for me, I had students come and help me with, clients that would come in to help them get an understanding that, you never know what's going to walk in the door. We
Hmm.
don't know what our hands are going to do in the
Oh
position.
yeah. Oh yeah.
I want them to not just practice on their, you know, friends or whatever, practice on a complete stranger that you don't know anything about and see what happens. But I feel like experience is so important, and this
Mhm.
fascination with speed. What's up with that? Like, just slow down, just do your own practice, then it will naturally evolve. You'll start treating more people yourself, other people. Maybe you don't need a huge clinical experience. I don't say you need one, but you need a lot of practice experience,
Mhm.
because when you're teaching, how can you be teaching first degree? And if we teach it like Mrs. Takata did, treat X, Y, and Z, treat it like this, and you'll see these results. Have you seen those results yourself? But if you have the experience of having seen those results, not because somebody told you this will work, because you saw it work. And I think that's quite a different level of understanding firsthand experience. Yeah. So
Yeah.
practice. Yeah.
Absolutely. I often get the question whether I have experience with treating that kind of ailment and that kind of ailment, and I usually answer C. I'm not a medical doctor. My
Hmm.
experience is to step aside when Reiki wants to do the job. So,
Right.
in which way would you describe what experience is needed?
Yeah. Well, one is, of course, just getting somebody on the table, you know. Um, let's talk strictly at Takata and how I was trained and how I was training people was that we have, let's say, 12 standard hand positions. They're standard in quotes because they all, a little bit
Yeah,
different here and
yeah,
there. But basically what they did was they covered all the major organs of the body. Takata was
sure.
very clear. She was
Mhm.
very clear. They covered all the major organs of the body. And because those organs are essential for our life, we can lose a foot, we can lose an arm, we're okay. You can't lose your lungs, you can't lose your, stomach. You can lose part of it, but you can't lose all of it. So the organ system is so important. And so we have to, that's why most of the time she would start on the head. But, we would do these 12 standard positions when we start because most people aren't sensitive to energy and they don't know where to put their hands. And if you tell students, oh, just put them wherever, then they're not confident yet. They want something that they know they can just do. And Reiki's so simple, you
Yes,
know?
yes.
But like, let's say seizures, for instance, like I had a student took my class, first degree class and second degree class, and she was doing remote treatments for a
Mm.
baby that was having like up to 20 seizures a day.
Oh gosh. Oh, the
Yeah,
poor, poor
and
little
so
one.
yeah, and so she's doing these remote treatments, and she's like, Robert, it's not working. And I said, well, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I'm doing the we call it FBT, full body treatment. That's the 12 standard hand position. She's like doing FBT. And I said, well, are you treating the feet? Because with head problems, a lot of times Takata would say like headaches and seizure, you also have to treat parts of the feet.
Mhm.
She's like, no. So she started treating the feet, seizures went away like that.
Great.
In Chinese medicine, there's all these correlations.
Mhm.
And in Hayashi's own manual, which I think has been mostly misunderstood, um, there's all these things like, oh, for things around the lips or the mouth, treat the inner arch of the foot kind of thing. And I'm like, well, that's obvious why you do, because of the certain meridian that goes from there to
Yes,
there.
yes.
So it's like, but if you don't know that, it's okay. You don't have to know the meridian system. But if your teacher says treat this for that because it works, that's how Takata would teach a lot. Just do it. She would just rattle it off, just learn it. I don't care if you know why, doesn't matter, because if you do it, you'll see the results and then you'll just keep doing it. Right? That was her philosophy, basically, I think, isn't
That's
it?
practical wisdom,
It
It's
was
it's
practical.
it's so refreshing to hear this, because often in the Reiki community during these years, I've heard you are not supposed to treat the feet because it's not traditional, or it's not traditional to integrate chakras and meridians because it's not Reiki and so on. And I think, gosh, this is like having two hands, You cannot say chakras or meridians are not traditional because they are built in. Come on.
Right, they're built into the system, in our body system.
In the
And
body
it's true.
system.
And it's
Yeah.
true. I mean, like Takata wasn't going to talk about, well, it's funny because she kind of did talk about meridians a little bit because she talked about the energy channels in the
Yes,
body, that
you
how
did.
Reiki flowed through.
Yeah.
But then she stopped, she stopped there, and she wasn't going to go into these long explanations in her 12-hour classes in first degree. She just basically was just like, and not only did she tell people what to do, like
Mhm.
what body areas to really pay attention to. And it's not like we're treating them, we're putting our hands there, and we see what happens. If the energy flows in, fine.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't, fine. But we need to address that area. And Hayashi's book is written really for like acupuncturists. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically like, put your hands here. It's like check in here and here and see what happens if the energy starts going in there. Because if you have a problem in this area of the body, it could be because there's an imbalance over here. And it's not like Reiki's flowing through some tube or something going over there to connect. It's more like, I don't know, of course, any German, but we have what's called a teeter totter. there's another word for it. It's like on the playground in elementary school. Yeah,
Mhm.
kindergarten, right? During,
Yeah,
right? So we have a teeter totter. So if you put a kid on this side,
mhm.
right, it affects this side.
Of course it does. Yes.
Of course, but you don't think like just because the kid sat there, energy's running down here, making this lighter.
Yeah.
No, it's not, but it's affecting it. You touch here, that happens over there. And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
yeah, that's
That's a lot.
Chinese medicine for me.
Sure.
And that's kind of like the understanding of why we do certain hand positions for certain conditions. We
Mm.
do the 12 standard, that's just like shotgun approach, treat everything. But there's some extra positions that will really can really help other problems.
Mhm.
And so those were just passed along in Hayashi's book, and then later orally, mostly orally. Sometimes Takata would let people write it down in her classes, but then later they were dropped. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, there's only 12 positions. Like, no, there's not. Like, there's a lot. There's unlimited positions, but here are the ones that the Hayashi found clinically relevant, and
Yeah.
Takata proved that worked. And in my experience, I've also found them to be most effective in treating all sorts of disorders, if you know where to at least start with your hands. So,
Mhm. Sure, of course it is. Uh, I've heard a lot about Takata teaching masters in very different ways.
mhm,
So,
yeah, true.
I, for example, that she did not pass on to the first masters real rituals, how to initiate or something like that. That sounds weird to me, and I think she must have done something, to,
Yeah, she trained her. She did train her masters differently and gave them different information. And partly because when she started teaching masters, um, she was doing it in the beginning, kind of how like I would when I was training masters. I would do it. She'd be like, okay, you sat through all these first degree classes and second degree classes. Sometimes they traveled with her to watch her teach classes. Did a lot of her early masters got a lot of training. Um, then, okay, I'll teach you how to do first degree initiations.
Mhm,
Okay, and then later, I'll tell you how to do second degree, right?
mhm.
Initiation, right? You had to wait. There was usually a waiting period.
I see.
During that waiting period, you're supposed to teach because you just learned first degree initiations. You've seen a lot of first degree classes being taught. You probably were assisting Takata in teaching those classes. You better teach that
Mhm,
because then she's going to come back and teach you second degree, like
mhm.
how to train a second degree student, how to do the initiation. Well, later in her life, right? Well, then she retired, right? She retired, like me, she retired for a short bit. And then, people kept asking her, no, I want to do master training or whatever. And so she kept training master. She had just stopped teaching first and second. So like people would go to her place in Iowa, like Barbara McCullough, and later Barbara Weber. And people would go to Iowa, and Fran Brown, they'd go to Iowa and train and with Mrs. Takata. But then, after that, Takata was getting older and older. And like when she went to train Rick, for instance, it's a good thing, she taught him, she didn't have a waiting period. She didn't have a waiting period between teaching her first degree initiations and second, because she never made it back. I mean, so it's kind of a time thing too. And later masters got, I feel like more, not to lessen it, I'm just saying it was a more of abbreviated because it wasn't like this long apprenticeship route. It seemed like the first masters got, specifically Virginia Sandall, John Harvey Gray, like John talks about, like, she taught a dozen classes at our place, like, so, I mean, he had quite extensive training, and Fran Brown kept bringing Takata back to California to teach more classes so she could watch her teach and
Sure.
spend time with her.
Mhm,
And Takata did the same thing with Hayashi. You
mhm.
know, oh, come over here for 6 months. How many of us live with first she lived with him in Japan for a while,
Yeah.
doing clinical work, intensive clinical work. Then she had Then she went back to Hawaii. Then she went back to Japan for a little bit. Then she went back to Hawaii. Then he followed for 6 months, and it was like 6 months of intensive training, lots of
That's
classes, lots of living together, lots of tests. And, that kind of training, it's just a given fact that when we give this kind of training to students, we're not going to end up training lots of masters, and that's fine. I mean, that's not my goal. My goal is to provide, when I was teaching, to provide the quality of the training. I really want them to get as much as they can, and hopefully I can help them along their path with understanding and jumping off from there. And, you know, welcome to the journey, of mastery, you know.
Hmm. So Takata taught for decades. I think
Yeah,
for 40 years or 45 years she
yeah,
was
that's right.
teaching, and so she was really, really experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And what I
Very.
always, when I was reading her two biographies, Fran Brown and what was the other one?
Helen.
Helen Haberly. Right, right,
Mm-hmm.
right. I always was impressed that she really took time, hours and hours treating people.
Yes.
And today, one of the things I really in my school I have to oof, invest with people is that they take time. Often
Right.
they think if I have 10 minutes my hands on the body and the problems are not gone, then Reiki won't do that. It's not enough energy, it's old energy or whatever. And I think, come on, give it a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I feel like Takata emphasized over and over again that you got to do the treatments, and for serious cases, you got to do, like, she would do multiple treatments in a single day on the same person
Yeah,
if they were really serious.
yeah.
If in just regular serious client, once a day till they start getting better, and then you can space them out more. And that's where this whole idea of 3 or 4 days in a row came from. That that's just start. But if there's like a chronic condition, like one of the people that I treated years ago, my wife and I actually did this as a team treatment. This elderly gentleman, had pretty severe dementia. Um, and so, I mean, to the point where luckily we were in a small town, but he would go downtown, walk down. There's no stoplights. This is a really tiny town. So
Mm,
he, go into a little restaurant. There's a few there in town, eat lunch,
mhm.
come out, sit on the bench outside on the street, and then go back inside because he forgot that he'd already eaten lunch. So he'd go back in and try to order lunch again. And the
Oh,
people are there like, no, no, you already ate lunch, right? I mean, he
okay.
was like, his memory was really poor.
Yeah, yeah.
And so his daughter and his son and his daughter-in-law wanted him to get Reiki treatments at the clinic. So I said, okay. I said, but he needs treatment every day. This is like an everyday kind of treatment. And I said, we can do it, 5 to 6 days a week, but I got to have one day off. So my wife and I team treated him. And in the beginning, it was interesting because, he'd forget his appointment, so we call him up on the phone. Oh, am I supposed to be there? Yes, I'll be there. So he walked down to the clinic, get his treatment. After weeks would go by, he started remembering his appointment more and more and more. And his family started noticing his memory was improving, where he was remembering he had eaten lunch, and he was diabetic. So he was always somebody was taking the sugar and stuff. His diabetes dropped where he didn't need the medication. Like, so you have the um, quantitative results that the blood sugar changed. You
Mhm,
know, you
mhm.
have his memory improving more and more and more, and it was remarkable. We treated him every day for months and months and months and months,
Mhm.
and because it was a serious case.
Yeah,
But you can't expect. I mean, one, we should not expect anything, but you can't like expect miraculous result if you don't do the treatments, right?
right.
And that's Takata try to inspire and tell her students, look, this is how it's done. So you can't expect to get Takata Takata, level stories where all these things happen if you don't do what she was doing, which was
Right.
doing the treatments.
Right. Hmm.
But there's one more thing I want to say about that, Walter, because I
Please.
love this story. I love this
Yeah.
story. There's a video of Barbara Brown telling the story, Barbara Brown being one of Takata's 22 master students. And also it's written in a book, but Barbara tells this story on a video that when she took her first degree training with Mrs. Takata, that Barbara had this damage to her eye since she was a kid. Um, and like some shrapnel got in her eye as a kid, so she could never really see out of one of her eyes.
Mhm.
And it was obviously damaged. I mean, she'd walk around like this, She couldn't see. So she went to the first degree class with Mrs. Takata. And, classic Takata style, Takata, she chose Barbara as the model to demonstrate the hand positions on. So, Takata would do the head positions and demonstrate for the class on Barbara. And then she'd go back and tell stories and always keep going back to Barbara's eyes, you know? Well, she did that for that evening. And then the next morning, Barbara Brown wakes up, goes in the restroom and flips the light on and looks in the mirror. She could see. She could see. She hadn't been able to see well at all for like 40, 50 years.
Gosh.
One treatment. Because, and then she went to class that night. And, the driver that drove Barbara there went in making this announcement, Barbara had a healing, and Takata just kind of looked at her and, nodded,
Mhm.
and that says a lot about Mrs. Takata. She just gave a little nod, like recognition that Reiki did its thing.
Yeah.
Not egotistical, not like, yes, I am Mrs. Takata and I am totally awesome. No, just a simple acknowledgement. And
Mhm.
Takata, would tell stories in her class where she's like, all these things are possible. And the only difference between you and me is I've been practicing longer.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
have 40 years of experience. And so my energy system is built up. And when you build up your energy system more, the healings, would come faster and quicker and more powerful. And to be able to heal somebody's eye with one treatment in front of all these witnesses, remarkable. I mean, but that's what Takata was trying to demonstrate with herself. Like, look,
Mhm.
you can do what I'm doing. Just practice. Just practice. She was trying to motivate him,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I call this the Reiki muscle when people really,
Yeah.
do the job that they build up the Reiki muscle, and it doesn't matter whether they are first degree, second, third degree. I've seen
Right.
people first degree who treat every day, 6 days
Yeah.
a week in their practice, 10 hours. They place their hands on, and you say, "Gosh, that's an
Yeah.
overview." And I've seen
Yes.
masters who rarely do anything with Reiki, and of course they have results, but not that far.
That's right. You're
Yeah.
right. Think of it as a Reiki muscle. And, you build it up and it's built up. And if you stop practicing, it goes back down, just like our
Yeah.
muscles. It's the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
thing. It's the
Yes.
same thing.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting. That's very very interesting. Yeah. You have done so much research about that, Robert, and I'm looking much forward to your forthcoming books. Do you want to tell a little bit about what books we can expect from you?
Sure. Well, in a perfect world, haha, I hope to get volume 2 and 3 out this year. They're so close, but the thing is, they've been close for 3 years, Walter. So I'm
I
trying to
see.
be realistic. But like the first book, or volume 2, I should say, is more about like the energetic system. There's stuff in there about that, about what's I consider the very essence of the practice. So of course the precepts are in there, but the literally like the background almost information of why does the initiation do kind of what it does. I mean, I don't give the details, but I give like more of the energy channel and how it flows and works,
Hmm.
and more things for people to reflect on. Volume 3 is what um, people would call a first degree manual,
Hmm.
but to me, Fran drilled it in my head, it's not a manual, because she would give out little booklets. It's a reminder booklet. It's a reminder booklet. It's not a manual.
Yeah.
And I get what she was saying, because I could write all about the external practice all I want, which is what volume 3 is. It's like, how I learned like the hand positions and what they were for. And some people be like, oh, I got this first degree manual. And it's kind of like thinking of like, if I wrote notes, like musical notes on a page. It's different than hearing those notes played by
Yes.
an orchestra,
Yes.
right, or something like that.
Sure.
It's totally different. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
there's the outer form,
Hmm.
and then there's like an inner form, so we can't really write about the inner form. We can kind of like try to get people to, like, do this practice so they experience this, but so the volume 3 is like the outer form of first degree.
Hmm.
um, but volume 4, I still am not sure if I'm going to publish. I'm not sure. I've written a bunch of it. Volume 5, though, is the reflections and advice on training masters, specifically in Usui, Shiki, Reiki, Ryoho. But like I said, it actually applies to any teacher that just wants to pick and choose maybe something that works well for them. I just want people to reflect about, trying to figure out, well, how can I provide a better quality, training experience for my own master students?
Hmm.
I had a master, I still have a master. I had this person I trained. This guy was already a master when I met him, and I had the privilege of training him. His name is Andrew, and he said something to me. I mean, it's amazing how much we learn from our students. It really
Oh
is.
yes.
I'm
Oh
like,
yes.
who's the
It's
teacher? Like,
wonderful.
he said to me, we become the teachers we wish we had.
Hmm.
And I thought about, I'm like, you know what? That is so true for me. I mean, like I mentioned before, my first few Reiki classes I took, there was some lack of information there, lack of understanding, and I didn't want to do that. If I ever decided to teach,
I
which I
see.
had no interest in teaching in the beginning, I had
Mhm.
none. But I was like, I want to know for me, but I can't ever offer training. I couldn't even think about it till I had, become that teacher that I wish I had,
Mhm.
you know, and that's a good way of phrasing it. So I'm hoping volume 5 is more of an inspiration for people,
I see. I see.
an inward reflection about how, their own master
Mhm.
training programs. And there's probably going to be some good advice for people in there that they might be like, oh, that's so interesting methodology of teaching. I like to keep a lot of humor
Mhm.
in my third degree classes.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Great. You mentioned that what you want to write about the training masters is for Usui, Shiki, Ryoho. What is your understanding of that in comparison to other Reiki schools?
Right. And so, I was trained in, let's say, a variety
Mhm.
of Reiki systems, including like, Gendai from, I trained with Hiroshi Doi sensei, and Komyo Reiki with Yakuden sensei, and other styles. You know, and what I noticed is like the training style let's say the way Takata was teaching in her early years of training masters was very thorough, and it was a long process.
Mhm.
This was not you show up for a couple hours, take a class, okay, goodbye. And of course, that's fine if that's what people are looking for, but that's not how people were trained in this particular system.
Mhm.
Look how Takata was trained by Hayashi.
Mhm.
It was not how it was. And
Correct.
so I just try to follow the advice given by Mrs. Takata, and that's why I really hope we were trying to get her autobiography published.
Mhm.
Hopefully that will happen in 2021.
Would be great.
And yeah, because there's a lot of great information in there.
Mhm.
But it talks about, what she had to go through to get the training and the thoroughness. And there's a letter she wrote to Rick Bachner, and I was so fortunate to be able to read these letters. And she said about the third degree, she's like, basically, it's not just about the money. They have to be the chosen one. They have to
Mhm.
be the chosen ones. In other words, they had to have the right character, the right you know, drive or whatever. But it's a character test she was really concerned with, you know, and she was looking for, and her master students, they come from a variety of backgrounds. So it's not like just like, oh, this one, because everybody's a little different, right?
Yeah, sure.
But there are people that she felt could be entrusted with the system,
Hmm.
you know, so that 100 years from now, if Mrs. Akkad would come back, she could sit on that student's class, you know, even generate and be like, okay,
Hmm.
yes, that I was teaching, like, you know, might not be exactly, and people think for some reason like traditional teachers were like interested in making clones or something of ourselves. We're not
Oh God.
cloning ourselves. I mean, before teaching Reiki, I taught some people how to play the drums.
Mhm.
And I did not expect them to play exactly like me.
No.
Like they were not going to be my clone. You know, they were going to have their own thing, but they all had the basics, you know, and the rhythm and the understanding of how things went together.
Mm.
So it's like we're given something, and then we as teachers have individual expressions of
Yes,
that.
sure we have. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's what's wonderful, you
Hmm.
know, because then we'll talk and we're like, wow, you know, I never thought about it that way, you know. You know, and just like listening to different musicians, you're like, what did you just do? Because that was pretty cool, you know. Like, you know, so but living the precepts, you know, for me, it always goes back to that. And you know, that's fundamental, and I love fundamentals. I love 101 classes. I love fundamental classes.
Yeah,
um
fundamentals are very important. So
yeah.
you said that the precepts are for you something fundamental. Which precepts do you refer to? Do you use Takata's precepts? Do you use the ones on the memory stone or?
Right, I feel like the meanings,
Mhm.
okay, are what's important. Like for me, and Takata might not even said them exactly like this. This is how
Mhm.
I choose to remember them.
Mhm.
And I think I read this in part of these in Penelope Jewell's book, one of her books a long time ago. But instead of, okay, so Takata was like, just for today, do not worry, for instance, right?
Mhm.
Well, I like the expression just for today because that's here and now. Let go
Mhm.
of worry. Let it go,
Mhm.
right? I just feel like that's more, for me, that resonates more.
I
Let go
see.
of worry. Just for a day, let go of anger.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just for a day, show your gratitude,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Because some people will say, be grateful. That's fine. But if you're showing your gratitude, that's showing your gratefulness, and, you know, and I feel like that's an important thing,
Mhm.
for many reasons. But fourth, just for a day, do your work honestly and with diligence.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think that's important. One, we have to be honest, you
Mhm.
know, because people can tell if you're not being authentic.
Mhm.
Most people, it just doesn't feel right, you know. And be diligent.
Yeah.
Well, according to my research, some of the most diligent workers I've ever heard of was Mrs. Takata
Yeah.
and Usui, you know, traveling all over the place and stuff. And Hayashi, I mean, he set up this clinic, you know, he's doing all those stuff. I mean, talking about diligence to the
Mhm.
practice.
Mhm. Mhm.
And precept 5, just for a day, be kind to all things that have life.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, for me, this is, you know, these are the ways I choose to remember
Yeah.
those precepts. And I feel if you do that, I mean, I don't know. For me, that works. I mean, Takata, I know sometimes would add in like the honor your parents, teachers, and elders. I get that. But to me, that was inherent in my upbringing
Mhm.
and from my parents. So, you know, the culture has changed and not everybody gets this kind of upbringing. It's
Mhm.
inherent in my upbringing. And I feel like if we follow these 5 precepts, um, you know, we will be Reiki practitioners. I mean, people should be able to be recognized
Yeah.
by their character,
Yeah.
you know, and if we're following the precepts, um, you know, and Takata talked a lot about them. And she talked about like gossip, which was basically like worrying and anger, kind of like but it's like, don't gossip. You know, I was told not to gossip. You know, because we don't know. You know,
Mhm.
we know
Right,
ourselves
right,
sometimes, and
right.
but living the precepts always, and
Mhm.
that's what makes a true
Right.
Reiki practitioner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful. Well,
yeah.
that's very interesting, Robert. Thank you for sharing this. If there would be one thing you would wish the Reiki community for the future, what would it be?
Ah, that's a good one. If
Or
it
maybe
was
two things,
one
if you
thing,
kind of.
well, whatever system,
Mhm.
whatever system you choose of
Yeah,
Reiki, you know, the flavors, as Fran Brown would call them, the Reiki ice cream flavors.
yeah.
You know, whatever one you choose, go deep,
Hmm.
go deep with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
See where it takes you, and you know, don't just do a little this, a little that, a little this, a little that. I mean, it's okay to study other ones. I
Mhm.
know I studied a lot of different systems, but I taught one, and that's like that old expression where if you're thirsty, right, are you going to dig 10 holes 1 foot deep, or one hole, right, 10 feet deep? it
Good,
it's
very good metaphor.
it's different. It's
Yeah,
different. And
yes.
so when you go into a practice like Reiki, it's a practice.
Hmm.
Don't make the mistake of being all scholarly and studying it up here. Make sure you always have that practice, practice, practice,
Yeah,
practice.
yeah.
Always practice. You
Yeah,
know.
very, very valuable advice. Thank you very much, Robert. I'm so happy to do this interview with you. It's really inspiring, and I feel your fire burning for what you're doing for Reiki. And I think you will write some very good books. And maybe they don't get published next year, but they will be published. And when they be published, I think there will be a backbone for the Reiki community.
Oh, I hope so. But
Yeah.
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you
It's been
very much,
great.
and I'm looking much forward to
Thank you.
to hear your talk at the Rainbow Reiki International Convention.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.